On a bright yet chilly daytime morning, just as the city was beginning to stretch awake, something happened inside a small neighborhood grocery store that would change the fate of 3 lives forever. It began with a sound, soft, trembling, almost too fragile to be heard. A mother's whispered apology to her hungry little girl. A cashier's uncomfortable silence. And a carton of milk being gently pushed back across a counter because a mother could not afford it. What no one realized was that at that exact moment, just a few feet away, a silent observer stood frozen. A man whose entire life had been shaped by abundance, luxury, and privilege. A man who had never known what it meant to choose between feeding a child and paying rent. A man who would soon discover that even the richest heart can be poor until it learns the value of compassion. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that restore faith in humanity, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindly Tube. It truly helps keep these real, emotional stories alive. The man watching everything was named Merrick Rowan, a 45-year-old millionaire investor known for his cold logic and business-first mindset. He had come to the small store that morning only because his car had broken down near the neighborhood and he decided to pass time while waiting for a tow truck. Merrick was not used to small grocery stores or quiet neighborhoods. He spent most of his time in towering offices and luxury hotels. But destiny had a strange way of pulling him exactly where he needed to be. Near the checkout counter stood Tessa Marlin, a 29-year-old single mother who looked like she carried the weight of entire storms behind her tired eyes. She wore a worn-out beige cardigan, a faded blue top, and jeans that bore signs of constant washing. Her hair, tied in a loose ponytail, was frizzed from rushing around. Beside her stood her daughter, Mira, a small 5-year-old with hopeful eyes and a soft pink jacket that was slightly too thin for the weather. Mira clutched her mother's hand with innocence that painfully contrasted the adult worries etched onto Tessa's face. Tessa had come into the store with a quiet determination, holding a small list and calculating every item with the precision of someone who could not afford a single mistake. She placed a loaf of bread, a small pack of rice, and a carton of milk on the counter. Mira looked at the milk like it was the most precious thing in the world. And perhaps to her, it was. Tessa reached into her purse to pull out her carefully counted money, but the moment she unfolded the bills, her heart sank. She was short by exactly 42 rupees. Her breath trembled as she whispered to the cashier. She asked him to remove the milk. Myra's smile dimmed instantly, like a candle snuffed out by a cold wind. She didn't cry. She didn't complain. She simply lowered her gaze, as if she had learned that disappointment was already a familiar visitor. Merrick felt something inside his chest tighten. He didn't understand it at first. He, who closed million-dollar deals without blinking, could not tear his eyes away from the scene. Something about the mother's quiet dignity and the child's silent acceptance dug painfully into him. He was a man used to control, but at that moment, he felt helplessly moved. As Tessa apologized to her daughter and prepared to leave with her reduced groceries, Merrick stepped closer. He watched her walk out of the store, Mira holding her hand but stopping briefly to glance back at the milk carton as though saying a silent goodbye. The moment they stepped outside, Merrick felt as though the bright daytime sun had somehow become heavier, forcing him to confront a truth he had avoided all his life. Wealth means nothing when the heart is emptied. He bought her groceries, not just the milk but everything she had hesitated to pick up, and hurried outside. But when he reached the sidewalk, the mother and daughter were already halfway down the street, walking slowly as though neither of them wanted the world to notice their struggles. Merrick called out, and when Tessa turned, the confusion in her eyes spoke volumes. She wasn't used to strangers calling her name, especially men dressed in tailored suits. Merrick explained that he had seen what happened and gently offered her the bag of groceries he had purchased. Tessa immediately shook her head. Her pride was fragile but strong. She said she could not accept charity. Her voice cracked as she admitted she didn't want her daughter to grow up thinking they needed to rely on others. But Merrick, for the first time in years, spoke not as a businessman but as a human being. He said he wanted to help because sometimes life gives us opportunities to choose kindness, and people should never walk past those moments. Tessa hesitated, but when Mira looked up at her mother with hopeful eyes, she finally accepted the bag. Merrick expected that to be the end of it. A simple act of kindness. But something in Tessa's expression, the mixture of gratitude, exhaustion, and unspoken fear, made it impossible for him to walk away. He found himself asking if she lived nearby and whether she might allow him to call her a cab since she looked like she had been walking for miles. Tessa reluctantly agreed. As they waited for the cab, Merrick noticed the small sewing needle marks on Tessa's fingers. Out of curiosity, he gently asked if she was a tailor. She explained that she used to sew clothes at a small community workshop before it shut down months ago. Since then, she had been doing minor repairs for neighbors, but it wasn't enough to cover rent, food, and school fees. Merrick listened silently, feeling a heaviness he couldn't quite name. He had funded dozens of businesses, invested in dozens more, but none of those decisions had made him feel the way he felt listening to her story. When the cab arrived, Tessa thanked him politely and prepared to leave. But just as she was closing the door, Mira stretched her little hand out and held Marek's fingers for a moment. It was such a small gesture, yet it held so much unspoken meaning, trust, gratitude, warmth. That night, Merrick couldn't sleep. He replayed the scene in the store over and over again. The world was filled with countless struggles, yet something about this particular mother and child had left an imprint on his heart. It reminded him of someone perhaps he had long buried. His own mother, who had raised him alone until he went to boarding school. A woman he had loved deeply but grown distant from after success consumed his life. Tessa's calm resilience mirrored his mother's, and Myra's trembling smile reminded him of himself decades earlier. The next morning, Merrick drove back to the same neighborhood. He didn't know if he would find Tessa again, but destiny had a strange way of guiding those who cared. He spotted her outside a modest apartment building, carrying a bag of clothes she had repaired for a neighbor. She looked surprised, almost alarmed, to see him again. But Merrick quickly assured her he wasn't there to intrude. He was there because he wanted to offer her something more than a bag of groceries. He explained that he was opening a new social enterprise focused on handmade clothing and tailoring services, and he wanted her to join as a lead designer for their local team. Tessa was stunned. She thought he was joking or pitying her. But Merrick clarified that he had already reviewed her work. The clothes she repaired were neat, precise, beautifully done. He wasn't offering charity. He was offering opportunity based on talent. The offer came with a stable salary, health coverage for her and Mira, and flexibility to work from home until she felt ready to join the workshop full-time. Tessa's eyes filled with tears. She covered her face, overwhelmed, and Mira hugged her waist as if sensing her mother's life was changing in real time. Over the next few weeks, Merrick visited often, not for business, but to make sure Tessa had the support she needed. He helped enroll Mira in a better school through the foundation he ran, ensuring she had books, uniforms, and lunch every day. Tessa slowly opened up about her fears, her past, and her dreams. Merrick opened up too, in a way he hadn't done with anyone in years. Their conversations were simple but healing. He told her about growing up alone, about losing touch with his mother before she passed, about the regret he carried silently. Tessa listened with kindness that felt like a rare gift. As months passed, the local workshop flourished under Tessa's leadership. She trained other struggling mothers, turning the place into a vibrant community where women helped each other grow. Merrick visited often, sometimes to discuss work, sometimes just to sit quietly in the atmosphere of shared hope that he had never experienced in boardrooms. Yet the moment that truly changed everything came one bright afternoon when Merrick found Mira sitting outside the workshop drawing pictures. She held up her latest one proudly, a drawing of 3 figures holding hands under a bright sky. A mother, a little girl, and a man in a suit who looked suspiciously like him. Marek's heart felt like it melted inside his chest. Mira told him she drew the picture because she hoped one day they could be a family. She said he made her mom smile again. Merrick didn't know how to respond, but that drawing told him something he had been feeling for months. He cared. Deeply. More than he had allowed himself to admit. He didn't confess anything that day. He didn't rush or force anything. But from that moment on, he became even more present, not just as a benefactor, but as someone who believed in Tessa and Mira with a sincerity that went beyond generosity. Tessa, too, began to see Merrick in a different light. Not as the millionaire who helped her once, but as the man who stayed. The man who listened. The man